they stopped coming.
Now,
we need to replicate that.
You said stop the boats.
And that's why...
Do you regret making such a black and white problem? You didn't say reduce. You didn't say reduce the boats by a third. You said stop the boats.
Because I am determined to stop the boats.
Hello, this is Never Mind The Ballots. I'm Harry Cole. Tonight, we are joined by the Prime Minister. Hundreds of Sun readers have submitted their questions. Now, it's time for some answers. With the election possibly just weeks away, things are looking grim for Rishi Sunak. Trailing in the polls, he says he was handed a hospital pass when he took over in September 22. But does that stack up? We asked our readers to submit their questions on the biggest issues of the day, and you did so in your hundreds. So thank you. Now, let's hear what he has to say. Prime Minister, hello, welcome to Never Mind The Ballots.
Well, thanks for having me. Nice to be here.
You were once the most popular politician in the country, serving in the most successful Tory government since Thatcher. It now looks like you could lose that massive majority. What went wrong?
Well, I think if you think about the last few years, we've unfortunately suffered from what are hopefully once in a lifetime, once in a generation, once in a century events. We had a pandemic with all the impact that had and disruption to our lives. And just as we were recovering from that, we then got hit by a war in Ukraine that drove up everyone's energy bills and inflation skyrocketed. And understandably, people are frustrated about that and the impact that it's had on them and their families' lives. I get that, of course I do. But I really believe actually at the start of this year that things are looking better and that we've turned a corner. And you can see that most clearly with the economy, which was, when I came into this job, my number one priority to fix. And inflation has now fallen from 11% to 3.4%. Energy bills are falling by hundreds of pounds, wages are rising. And because of all of that, we've been able to now significantly start cutting people's taxes by £900 for an average worker. And actually, when you put all of that together, I think you can start to see signs of confidence and optimism returning. And my pitch would be simple. Look, the plan that we've put in place is starting to show the change that people want to see. And if we stick to it, there's a brighter future ahead.
But it doesn't seem to be working. I want to show you something. It'll be on this screen here. When you took over as Prime Minister in October 22, the polls were about 19% for the Tories. You started with a bad hand, I'll give you that, but you managed to start to get things back. You started to go up in the polls and you got almost up to 30%. But now you've dropped back down to Liz Truss levels, back down to 19 last month. And at the same time, Reform UK have been gaining support. Now, that's on your watch, isn't it? What's to blame for that?
Well, as I said, look, it has been a frustrating time, and I completely appreciate that. But look, there's going to be lots of polls, and you know this better than most because you've covered multiple elections.
They're consistently looking pretty grim, right?
But what matters is the general election, and that's what I'm focused on.
Go on.
I'm sure we'll get to that.
Tell us, reveal us, a Sun World exclusive.
No. Look, on that, I've been clear, actually, because I said, look, my working assumption is we'll have an election in the second half of the year.
You've been clear when it might be. You've also ruled out dates. You've ruled out a May election. You've publicly ruled out a May election.
But that's because we've got really important local elections to focus on. And actually, I'm sure we'll talk about that. But local elections are a great opportunity to see the contrast of what Labour in power means. Look at Birmingham. The Labour Council there bankrupted the largest local authority in Europe and handed everyone there a 21% council tax increase.
Can you rule out
in contrast to mayors like Andy Street and Ben Houchin in Teesside, where I was out campaigning yesterday. But look, I said my working assumption is there'll be an election in the second half of the year, and I'll stick to that. But ultimately, look, we've got a long-standing tradition. It's the Prime Ministers that decide when we're going to call an election, and I haven't decided because I'm busy focusing on the things that matter to people, which I'm sure we're going to talk about, making sure that we improve the economy, get people's pay packets rising, cutting their taxes, getting illegal migration down,
lots of our readers have written in.
That's the things that I'm focused on delivering for people.
Scores, I'd go as far to say, if our readers said they just want you to call the date now. Just tell us when it's going to be. Just tell us, almost get out of the way. With those polling numbers, can you understand why there's sort of growing rumours and speculation and briefing in Westminster that your political enemies within the Tory party might move against you after the May local election?
So, Harry, look, obviously, that's your job. You're a political journalist. You spend your time in Westminster. And if I'm being totally candid with you, that's not where I'm focused, right? I'm out and about across the country most of the time, talking to people about what's on their mind. And I've got to tell you, I was out yesterday talking to God knows how many people over the course of the day in Teesside. Were people talking to me about the date of the election? No. What they were talking to me about is our childcare reforms. The fact that actually this week we're rolling out more free childcare to working families, which is a good thing. They're talking about what we're doing to help them with their bills and the tax cuts that we're putting in place. They're talking to me about what we're doing, crucially, to cut illegal migration.
We're talking about migration
to cut the cost of net zero.
Can I read
Those
you
are the things that
something?
people are talking to me about, and actually that's what I'm focused on.
Here's what people are
delivering
talking
to
about. Here's what one reader said. His name's Bertie. He said, in your local election broadcast last year, you said your party had 5 priorities and there'll be no tricks, no ambiguities. We're either delivering for you or we're not. Waiting lists are up, boats are up, growth is bumping around 0. Bertie says, do the public not have a right to conclude that you're not delivering by the standards that you set yourself and have a right to get rid of you?
Great, well, let's have that conversation. So I set out 5 priorities. Right, I'm actually delighted that Bertie has focused on those because I think they're the right ones, right? And let's recount what they were. To halve inflation,
I thought you were going to give me a quiz then. Yeah.
Well, that's my job, not yours. Halve inflation, grow the economy, reduce debt, cut waiting lists, and stop the boats. I was very clear. And actually, as Bertie acknowledged, right, I did something that hadn't been done before. I was very clear with the public. This is what I'm focused on. This is what I believe to be not just my priorities as Prime Minister and as Rishi. I think these are the country's priorities. And I want to deliver against them and people can hold me to account. And look, the most important one was inflation, more than halved, from 11% down to 3.4%. The economy outperformed all expectations last year, and actually at the start of this year, the signs are very positive. Debt is on track to fall, as we said it would be, according to the Independent Office for Budget Responsibility has said we're meeting our fiscal rules. Waiting lists have now fallen for 4 months in a row, and admittedly, progress there has not been as strong as I would like.
Let's talk about the boats.
And we all know the reasons why, but they have fallen for 4 months in a row now. And on boats, I'm sure we're going to talk lots about it. We're busy getting on with our Rwanda bill because I want to get this thing up and running.
The vast majority of questions we received were about small boats and immigration. Martin writes, the current situation with immigration, both legal and illegal, makes a mockery of undertakings the Conservatives made when they came to power. Your own former Home Secretary, your own former Borders Minister, a friend of yours, say you won't stop the boats and you don't really care about reducing legal migration. How did they reach that conclusion?
Well, first of all, look, I speak as someone who's comes from a family of immigrants, right? And this is really important to me. And like your readers, and I've spent a lot of time talking to them about this as well, I think this is fundamental to our country. Why? Because our country is built on the notion of fairness. It's central to our national character. And of course, we're a welcoming and tolerant people, and my own personal story is an example of that. But that's got to be done fairly. And when people jump the queue, come here illegally, and then put pressure on public services in the way that they do, and we're not able to remove them in the way that we want to, that's not right. And I've been very clear that just said, it offends my sense of fairness, and that sense of fairness is central to our character. So what are we doing? Because like your readers, I agree. Now, more than any other Prime Minister in history, I've really gone at tackling this problem. I spent more time on it than anything else other than the economy.
But
and we're in the midst of, well, actually, hang on.
The boats are going up. Well, they're up a third this year already.
And they were down a third for the first ever time last year. When everybody said, and actually I remember having an interview with you at the time, everyone said to me,
the graph's going the wrong way again.
Yeah, everyone said you won't be able to do anything about this. They've only ever gone up. But actually the first year in this job, why? Because we got a deal going.
They went down and now they're going back up. We're back to square one, aren't we?
No, we're not, because progress is still being made. What did we do with Albania? They accounted for a third of the arrivals we had the year before last. I negotiated a new deal with Albania. Obviously, it's a safe country, and said, hang on, if someone comes here illegally, we'll be able to return them back. We've then returned thousands of people back to Albania, and what happened? They stopped coming. Now, we need to replicate that.
You said stop the boats.
And that's why...
Do you regret making such a black and white problem? You didn't say reduce. You didn't say reduce the boats by a third. You said stop the boats.
Because I am determined to stop the boats. And that's why the Rwanda scheme is so important. Now, the experts on this are people like the National Crime Agency, who also say you need a deterrent. What does that mean? It means that I want to be able to make it the case, very clearly, unequivocally, if you come to our country illegally, you won't be able to stay and we will be able to return you. Either to your home if it's safe, but if not, to a safe alternative, and that's where Rwanda comes in. Now, that's why I'm doing everything I can to get this bill through Parliament so that we can start sending people to Rwanda. And once we can get that done, you will see that people stop coming because it won't be worth their while paying anyone.
Have you got a contract with a carrier to take people to Rwanda yet?
Yeah, we've got all the plans in place.
So you've got a company. I'm not asking you who, but you have a contract with a company.
I am highly confident. You wouldn't expect me to get into those details.
No, I'm not asking for name, but you do have the contract in place.
I'm highly confident that, yes, we can operationalise the policy.
Is the contract with the RAF?
I can operationalise the policy, as we've said. But look, the question you should be asking, all your readers, right? No, but because you did ask it to me, but the clear thing is, look, is this an issue that needs fixing?
Yes.
I agree that it is. And actually, those are my values, right? So, look, and the election, there'll be a clear choice on this issue. I've got a plan that I'm working towards. And the alternative is, I think you had Keir Starmer on here the other day, right? I have not seen an alternative to our plan. So yes, I know people will have criticisms. I know people will want to snipe from the sidelines. But the question is, what is the alternative to our plan?
Well, look,
because I'm confident that our plan is going to work, and that's what we need.
At every single point, Rwanda has hit sticking blocks. What happens when those pyjama injunctions from the ECHR come through? You said you're going to ignore them, but what happens when they turn into permanent rulings of the ECHR? Are you ready? Are you really ready? You mentioned it in your leadership debate, your leadership pitch back in 2022. Would you countenance leaving the ECHR to get Rwanda going?
Look, on this, I've been very clear. I believe that our scheme, including the Rwanda part of it, all our plans to tackle illegal migration. Let me just answer the question, Harry. I believe that our plans are compliant with all our international obligations, including the ECHR. But, right, I believe that border security and controlling illegal migration is more important than our membership of any foreign court.
So you could countenance putting in the next Tory manifesto a pledge to leave the ECHR?
Well, I said, I believe that our plans are compliant with all our international obligations, including the ECHR, but I do believe that border security and making sure that we can control illegal migration is more important than membership of a foreign court, because it's fundamental to our sovereignty as a country.
So do you think that perhaps if you'd taken that line at the beginning of your premiership rather than the end, you might be in a strong position on this now?
I mean, that's the line that I've consistently said.
It's firmer than your Bills win, though, isn't it?
No, the bill's very clear. It gives ministers the power to do what they need to do. I've been very clear that I wouldn't let a foreign court block us from sending flights. And I'm confident that our plans are compliant with all our international obligations. But I'm also clear that securing our borders and controlling illegal migration to me is more important than membership of any foreign court, because this issue is central. Right? As I said, that's why so many of your leaders have asked questions about it. It's why I've spent so much of my own time as Prime Minister focused on it, because, as I said, I come from a family of immigrants. And I think this will always be a welcoming, tolerant, compassionate country, but that has to be done fairly. It has to be done legally. Look, we are a people who wait our turn. We put in our fair share. We play by the rules. And this offends every one of those notions. And that's why it's so important that we grip it. And the choice of the next election is, who do you think is more likely to grip this problem with a plan? Is it me or is it Keir Starmer? And I can tell you, I will get this thing done for everyone, especially all your Sun readers.
That's enough of the electioneering there. Now, look, listen, it's getting a bit heavy.
I think your show is called Never Mind The Ballots. I mean, there's a polling station sign behind you.
Exactly. Look, I mean, it's getting a bit heavy. Let's. A lot of our readers also have some slightly random questions for you.
Right, OK.
The first one, and I'm sorry to do this, is a very popular question from our readers. Why do you wear your trousers so short?
I mean, I don't think they are that short.
They're pretty short. I mean, there's a good 2 inches there.
No, there definitely isn't.
Is it style? Is it trendy?
I tend not to like lots of baggy kind of stuff at the bottom of my ankle. I don't think they are that short.
All right. When did you last go to Wetherspoons? Is another question.
When did I last go?
That wasn't a photo up with your...
I was in Wetherspoons actually not that long ago. I think I was in Rother Valley. I was in a Wetherspoons, actually, doing one of my events, talking to everyone there in the local community. And I think we have a Wetherspoons at home in Northallerton, which is fantastic.
What's your go-to order?
Well, actually, I used to go there with my kids in the old days when I had more time, because we used to do the junior park run, from memory, I think. And then we'd go there for breakfast more than anything else, because I used to like the breakfast.
Another question.
Actually, I think I probably still have the app on my phone.
Well, you can send me a pint later, and I'll send you my table number. Talking of girls, do you let your girls have smartphones? This question came up a lot. Do they have smartphones? And do you think that under 16s
So I have two, without getting into too much of their private lives, but I have 2 girls who are 11 and 12, about to be 13, who thankfully probably won't be watching this. But they do both have phones, and they kind of got those phones at the end of their primary school. And I talk to my wife about this a lot. And actually, these questions I approach first and foremost as a dad, as a parent. And we are trying to juggle that like all parents are. And it's actually I'm still kind of forming my views about what the right thing to do with my wife.
Some of your MPs want a ban on under 16s.
And look, I think certainly we need to be very cognizant of the impact that social media is having on young people. You've seen the rise in mental health. And look, there's not a definitive link, but there's lots of people who are saying, look, we need to be careful about this. Obviously, it's distracting at schools, which is why we've been much clearer now that people should not be having their mobile phones at schools, obviously.
Yeah.
And we've passed something called the Online Safety Act, which means that we can protect our kids from seeing harmful content online, because that's really important.
One more quick fire one, and people are interested in this one. When was the last time you spoke to Boris Johnson on the phone?
I don't know, actually. I spoke to him.
Was he going to join you on the campaign trail?
I spoke to him in person at the end of last year, and we've messaged since then as well.
Is he going to join you on the campaign trail?
Are you
going to share a platform? What about Liz? What about Liz? Are you going to three of you stand there together?
Anyone from the Conservative family who wants to see a Conservative government re-elected and doesn't think Keir Starmer is the right person to lead our country will be welcome on the campaign trail, right? Because ultimately that's the choice. It's Keir Starmer or me as Prime Minister after the next election.
And Boris, Liz and Rishi.
If you want to keep cutting taxes, if you want a more sensible approach to net zero, if you want to tackle illegal migration, I think those are all things that your readers want, then we're the people that are going to deliver that for you.
Prime Minister, we're going to get back to the big policy issues in a moment, but there's a couple of things now you're here, and I've wanted to ask you these for a while, and we've found the appropriate time. How did you think it was appropriate to hold a US green card, also known as a permanent resident card, for 7 years as an MP and a minister?
I think I've addressed this in the past. It was a legacy thing, and it wasn't
a green card means that you claim permanent residence.
No, and I addressed this at the time. I had it from my time living in the US, and it was just not something I'd got around to.
You're meant to give those things back. Your spokesman said that you used the green card to travel as an MP and a minister, but only handed it back as Chancellor. That is contrary to the green card rules.
No, actually, no, and I addressed it all at the time, and again was confirmed by all the lawyers at the time. I'd acted in accordance with all the rules.
Is the UK is your permanent home, right?
Yes.
Are you planning to go back to America?
No, I mean, the UK is my home.
So under the current non-dom rules, you have to declare that the UK is not your permanent residence were you to get non-dom status, which your wife used to have. Is your wife domiciled in India or America?
Again, I'm not here to talk about my wife, Harry. She's not.
But
I
think the country have the right to know whether a misleading application for non-dom. Because was she planning to live in the UK permanently?
My wife has also addressed all of those things at the time as a private citizen. And as you know, the recent budget that the Chancellor did announced that we would be scrapping the non-dom regime anyway.
Some loopholes in that, but we'll save that for another day. Look, one more thing on this. Your family income derives a lot from your wife's shareholdings in Infosys. Have you ever read their annual report?
No.
I'll read it. I have. 2021, it boasted the company has been successful in the UK advocating for immigration legislation in the best interest for mobility of workers in key markets in the US and UK. Has anyone from Infosys ever lobbied you about immigration?
No.
Can you see how people might understand that, or at least see the concept of a conflict of interest there?
I mean, I can't control who I fall in love with, right? And I happened to fall in love with my wife when I met her. And her family have done something incredibly special. Her dad created a company from scratch, coming from absolutely nothing when he was growing up in India. It's a company that employs thousands and thousands of people around the world, including thousands of people here in the UK. And I have nothing but pride and admiration for everything that he's achieved. And no amount of your questions or anyone else's questions are ever going to make me walk away
US border official, no US official ever raised your green card with you. You weren't told to give it back.
Of course I wouldn't. Of course, there's nothing that I speak to them about. Actually, my wife's family are not even involved in that company and haven't been for years. I mean, my wife's dad is a grandparent now, is more focused on spending time with his grandkids than he is about that. And actually, the suggestion otherwise is clearly ridiculous.
Okay. Let's leave it there. We've got a lot to cover now. We've got defence, housing, and pensions.
Oh, actually, when it comes to migration, though, because you raised the topic, actually, because we talked about illegal migration, but I think rightly people also say, what are you doing about legal migration?
Oh, and what are you doing?
Yeah, and then look, the numbers are clearly too high. They need to come down. So again, you can judge me by my actions. We've announced a set of measures that will essentially halve the levels of net legal migration into this country, reduce them by around 300,000. That's measures where we've tightened up what was happening with this social care visa, which was being abused, stop dependents coming alongside students as well. We've raised the salary that you need to earn so that you can get a work visa here considerably, because that hadn't been done in a while. And we've said that actually if you're bringing family dependents here, again, you need to be able to show that you can support them. So all those measures combined, a massive tightening up of the system that I announced and delivered as Prime Minister, you will see that start to benefit the numbers this year. And I said it will roughly halve the levels of net migration
big issues
into this country by around 300,000. And again,
Big
choice
issues
of the
around
next
readers.
election is on that issue.
We've heard the election. Yeah, come on.
But the choice
Can we talk
is,
about
but
defence,
these
housing or
things-
pensions? Pick
but
one. Defence,
they-
housing or pensions?
Whatever you want. Do you want to do
Defence. All right. Last time we attempted to upgrade our nuclear deterrent, this is a question from a reader, and maintain our fighting force. Defence ran at 5% of GDP. We're trying to do both of those now in a time of war on the European continent. When is defence spending going up?
Well, it already is going up.
Well,
and that's...
your former Defence Secretary, your
Can I-
former
I
Armed
mean,
Forces
why don't I-
Minister,
why don't I
top
answer-
brass,
why don't I
everyone
answer
says
that?
you need to go up more.
Well, I don't think I've ever had a day in this job where someone has said that you don't need to
it's
spend
the
more on
defence of the
something.
realm, Prime Minister. I mean, this isn't just
and
tinkering
actually, no,
around
it's
with
a
the Treasury.
serious point because our security is really important, and that's why, as Chancellor, in fact, I oversaw the largest increase in defence spending since
that
the
was
end
then.
of the Cold War.
This is now.
Well,
It's a different world now.
Hang on, I've just finished the question. You've got to be able to say when politicians do things because they see risks are coming and then act in advance of them, you've got to be able to appreciate that that's a good thing to do, because if they waited for things to happen and then acted, then you'd be spending all your time saying, well, why didn't you do this sooner? So you can't have it both ways. But we saw then that the risks to us were increasing, and it was right that we invested more. And actually that more happens over a period of time. It's £24 billion. It's the largest increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. And since then, this Chancellor has continued to increase defence spending by billions of pounds, strengthening our nuclear enterprise, rebuilding our stockpiles. And what you've seen is we're signing partnerships with countries around the world, with Australia and America to build the next
NATO's
generation of nuclear submarines, also with Japan and Italy for the next generation of fighter warcraft. And we have taken a leading role, which I've been particularly proud of in Ukraine. The first visit I did this year was to Ukraine. I was the first foreign leader there to announce more support. And we have consistently made the argument that others need to match our ambition. So yes, we are keeping everyone at home safe, but part of keeping everyone at home safe is making sure that we support Ukraine. And that is what we are doing. And people should be very proud of the contribution we're making, because I certainly am, but we will continue to back our armed forces.
We've got big issues to cover. We're going to have to do them very quick because I know we're running out of time. We've had an absolute sackload of questions about housing. You're watering down of the leasehold bill. You're watering down of renters reform bill. What is going on and why are you letting down renters?
No, that's not right. Actually, as a junior minister, I oversaw the bill.
But what about now? No, we're talking about now.
I'm just going to answer the question.
Not the past,
Harry.
now,
I'm just going to answer
today.
the question. Actually, as a junior minister, I passed the bill that actually banned tenant fees, because that was one of the big concerns. Actually, we wanted to make sure that renters knew that we were backing them, so we banned tenant fees. But our renters reform bill, what it will do is end no-fault eviction. And it comes alongside the other changes.
It's going to make it much harder to do that.
And it's going to come alongside the other changes we're making to improve standards in the private rented sector, which is really important, because we want to make sure that landlords do provide decent and safe accommodation for people, and that the local authorities have the powers to intervene where that's not happening. So look, all those things together will mean that we'll back renters. But the most important thing I want to be able to do is make sure that renters can also ultimately become home buyers. And that's why it's important that we continue to get inflation down, so that
just
interest
while
rates
we're on
can
the
come down and
subject
people can afford a mortgage.
of homeless, are you really going to pass a law that's going to fine homeless people for being smelly?
No,
outrageous.
No, actually, I wouldn't believe everything.
Well, I mean, it's come from your own government.
No,
I mean,
that's not. No, what we are doing is actually we have a law dating back to the 1800s, which essentially...
how are they going to pay the fine if they're homeless?
Again, I'm happy to answer the questions. You've got to let me answer them. So we have a law in this country dating back to the 1800s called the Vagrancy Act, which essentially does criminalise people simply for having nowhere to live. And that's not right. And what we have said we're going to do is repeal that law so that people aren't criminalised simply for having nowhere to live. That's not right. So we're going to repeal that. What we are going to do is make sure that the police have the powers they need to tackle behaviour that is intimidating to other people, because I think it is important that people are able to walk around their local communities without fear of being intimidated. So I think it's right the police have the powers to tackle that. So we'll make sure the police have the powers to do that. And at the same time, we're investing billions to tackle homelessness, whether that's providing move-on accommodation or to tackle drug and alcohol addictions. And actually that package of support is making a difference. And what we've seen is the levels of people rough sleeping is lower than it was pre-pandemic, lower than the peak, and is heading in a downward direction.
One more topic, because we are really running out of time now, but scores of pensioners have got in touch as well. They feel that, I'm going to read this from Michael. He's worked for 50 years. He's paid income tax at 25%. He bought his house when interest rates of 15%. He's got the triple lock. Yes, he acknowledges that. But a rise of 7% when his rent's up 8.6%, council tax is up 7.5%, water's up 14%, gas and electric still extortionate. Is there going to be more for pensioners before the election, or is that a lot?
Well, I'm really proud of the fact that you mentioned the triple lock as a kind of aside.
Well, no,
it's a massive policy that
I accept that,
means,
but
and it
people are
means
still
that
hurting
right
out there.
now a pension is £1,000 better off than it would have been if we didn't have the triple lock. So that's the scale of what that policy has done. And that's why actually over winter, when I know things were tough with energy bills, we provided all pensioners with an additional bonus equal to their winter fuel payment. So up to £300 additional cost of living payment to help. So that's just hit most people's bank accounts over the last few months, over the winter. And the triple lock means that pensions will be going up by £900 pretty much as we speak. That's a significant increase, and we remain committed to the triple lock. And the Chancellor made that clear that that's what you'll get from a future Conservative government, because we're, of course, on the side of pensioners.
Right, you come up for air. We barely made a dent in our readers' questions, but we are going to join by the Sun Cabinet next, who are going to have some more tricky questions to you. And I'm afraid we've ran out of time before we can get to the Taylor Swift quiz. So, next, the Prime Minister will take the Sun's Cabinet questions. I'm Harry Cole. This is Never Mind the Ballots. Time now for the Prime Minister to quiz by a rather different cabinet. We're joined by the Sun's Cabinet, Dr Pasha Makajay, our Health Secretary, Grant Davies, our Transport Secretary, and Hugh Andre, our Defence Secretary. So, Dr Pasha, you have a question for the Prime Minister. What did you make of his performance there?
I mean, you didn't let him speak.
Oh, look at this, ganging up already. Did you stitch that up?
So I have a question for you, Prime Minister.
Go for it, Doctor.
You have suggested that the increasing waiting lists are because of industrial action. And if that's been the case, then why are we still here where 60% of junior doctors have yet again polled to strike? And the government continues to spend taxpayer money, double the amount that it would take to just resolve this issue. Why are we still here?
So, first of all, thanks for everything that you do. And you're a GP, is that right? Yep, very good, like my dad. And look, healthcare is really important to me. The NHS is really important to me because that's the family that I grew up in. And I wanted to make sure we put more money into it and supported it, which we've done. So there's record funding going in. And it's been difficult and frustrating not to have been able to resolve the industrial action with some of your colleagues. The good news is we've resolved it with everyone, apart from the junior doctors, starting with the nurses. So now, actually, whether it's the nurses, physiotherapists, everyone else in the agenda for change,
Not true, though, is it?
Well, no, and the consultants now.
The consultants actually didn't accept the pay that you...
And they have just recommended the latest offer to their members. So they have done that now, the committee.
But the members didn't agree to it.
But they're currently looking at the new offer that the committee have again recommended to their members. So now it's only the junior doctors, which is disappointing.
Well, the Royal College of Nursing didn't accept the pay that was offered to them either. They're not striking, that's beside the point, but they didn't accept the pay.
But the agenda for change workforce did, so which is a million strong. And look, these things are always a balance. So there's record money going on, but we've got to do things that are fair, that are sustainable. And we took the recommendations and advice of the independent bodies. So it's not the government. We've got independent bodies that make a recommendation. We accepted those in full. And actually the junior doctors had an average increase of around 10%, which was higher than anyone else in the public sector, higher than the nurses. And then we went beyond that and they still said no, which is frustrating. Because I look at, like you, I want to see people get the care they need. So actually the last few months, as we were talking about with Harry, we've seen progress. So the last 4 months, the waiting lists have come down over 4 months, which is really positive, shows that we can make progress on this, particularly when we don't have industrial action. You saw a really big decline. And we're doing some other things too. So you're going to be a GP. My mum was a pharmacist as well. We're making it much easier for people to get some of the treatments they need from their pharmacist. So for sore throats, sinusitis, ear infections, now you don't have to go and see your GP because you guys are busy and lots to do. You can actually just go and see your pharmacist direct, get the medicines you need. That will ease pressures on GPs and make it that much easier for people to get the care they need.
But the GPs are now thinking about, 75% of GPs are now thinking about going into strike as well. They're not happy with the amount of pressure that is put on them, considering that the whole NHS budget, they only get 8% of the pie. So that you've got, your dad was a GP, so you must know all about this, that the pressures are mounting up on GPs. And What do you say to that?
Well, actually, that's why I think this pharmacy first that we're doing is actually a really practical, positive thing that will ease some of that pressure on GPs and be great for patients. Because I saw both, because my mum being a pharmacist, my dad being a doctor, and pharmacists now are so well trained, they're very well trusted by their local community, and I'm sure you all know your pharmacist, your local pharmacist. And as I said, for those common ailments, sore throats, ear infections, sinusitis and other things, you won't have to get at that 8 a.m. scramble on the Monday. You can just go to your pharmacist. Won't have to take time off work, things like that, especially if you have young kids. They'll be able to give you the antibiotics that you need for you or your kids. And I think that's a really positive thing that will help people, but also ease some of the pressure on GPs as well.
Thank you, Doctor. Son Transport Secretary, Cabby, Grant. I think I know what this question's going to be.
Well,
before I read it on here.
Oh, yeah, so it's on your card, right?
right.
Go on then, Grant.
As you know, I'm a London cabbie.
Yeah.
I speak to my passengers all the time. I'm Minister for Transport, but the one transport issue, I know you've touched on it earlier, that people in the back of my taxi talk about a lot of the time, Rishi, and it's the transport from Calais to Dover in small boats.
That's not the question I thought it was going to be, actually.
I heard you be quite, open with Harry early on, saying you're doing this, the Rwanda deal. But from me to you, Mr. Prime Minister, why can't you put the Navy in the Channel? You're talking about how we're going to stop it. If you put boats in the Channel, that when the dinghies come over, you get hold of them, the Navy tow them back to Calais and say, no, thank you, right? If you want to send a message to them organised gangs who are bringing people over, that's how you do it. You don't spend £500 million going to Rwanda that could be in the health service and the education service, right? You need to put a strong message out that if you cross the Channel, we're waiting for you and we're going to take you back to France and you can't come over. That'll stop the gangs.
Well, actually, you've got someone sitting next to you who's served who can probably explain why that's not practical.
It's the same reason that we couldn't go from Northern Ireland into the Republic of Ireland wearing uniform and carrying weapons, because ultimately that's an invasion of a foreign territory, and we have very specific lines
you can see the
anger. Borders have two sides.
And I think,
you can see the
and
anger
to add to Hugh's point, the issue, and I share your frustration, first of all, right? Let me say
It's
that.
the public's frustration.
Yeah, no, well, I agree,
Prime
right?
Minister.
And as you would have heard me talk about it earlier, probably. So I completely share your frustration. Look, the other practical thing is, unlike where you might have seen in Australia, where they've been able to do those turn-back tactics, what they were dealing with there were very big boats, where you can, and in international waters, to Hugh's point, where you have that ability. When you're talking about an inflatable dinghy, which, by the way, these gangs stuff dozens more people on these boats than they can take.
Yeah, but wouldn't it be safer then if the Navy was to intercept them, put them on a safe...
Because they would, as you would tell you, they'll capsize.
My suggestion has been, hire ferries, give them free transport to the Isle of Sheppey. It's an island.
We can get into the policy debate. Next
on net zero.
OK, net zero. Net zero. We all know net zero, all these green policies hit working class people like me the hardest, right? Will you call a referendum on net zero? Let the population say, we're going to go down that green route. It's going to cost us more money, but we're happy with it. Or, Mr. Prime Minister, we don't want it. We can't afford it. It's going to bankrupt us. Please.
He's right. No one was ever asked about it, was there?
We don't need a referendum because we're going to have a general election and you're going to be able to make that choice. Because I made a very clear change in our policy direction last year. I got a lot of flack for it, you might remember. I stood up in September, October, whenever it's September, and said we're going to change our approach to net zero. We've done more than anyone else in the world to cut emissions. Of course I care about the planet, I've got two young girls, but we've done more than anyone else. We're planning to do more than anyone else, and we need to do this in a sensible way that brings people along with us and does not saddle people, ordinary people,
no one was ever
with
asked,
costs. And my point is exactly that. So I've scrapped all those things that were going to cost you and all your families thousands and thousands of pounds, switching out boilers, cars, all this stuff before it was time, upgrading your home. And at the election, if that's the approach that you want, which is cutting the cost of net zero, building our energy security and making sure we do it in all this in a pragmatic way, that's what I'm delivering for you. And the alternative is crystal clear. So you don't need a referendum because we're going to have an election. And on net zero, there's a clear choice. And you can go back and read my speech. And I made the point that when everyone last debated all these climate targets, they just waved them through in Parliament without saying, hang on, this is what this means for everyone. It might sound great, but what does it actually mean for people? And it meant thousands of pounds of costs. And I said, we're never going to do that again.
A vote for you is going to make net zero. We're not going that way.
We're going to get there.
Zero.
We're just going to get there in a pragmatic and proportionate way. We're going to cut the costs of getting there and save you and everyone else watching thousands of pounds, because we've just got to do this stuff. Look, I think people want to get there. They just want to do it in a sensible, proportionate, pragmatic way that does not bankrupt the country in the process.
Grant,
So
thank
that's
you.
what we'll have.
Thank you.
Defence Secretary, what did you make of the PM on defence?
Well, I'm not going to go on to the high-level macro points. I want to get because I want to get into the, the things that matter. And last year, myself and a co-founder started building the first ever veterans community marketplace called WeServe. My questions come from that community. We surveyed 214,000 veterans and serving members of the armed forces. All too often, they can't speak. So I'm going to ask the first question. Prime Minister, is it acceptable that we currently have serving members of the armed forces showering in car parks at RAF Lossiemouth and RAF Myram whilst there's no hot water or heating in their accommodation blocks and they're continuing to be charged for it?
No, of course that's not acceptable.
Please, could you therefore address that?
Yeah, no,
because that's what that's the detail. That's what's bringing down morale.
And Hugh, thank you for your service as well. And I think we were chatting, you know, where my home is in North Yorkshire, Catterick Garrison, which is our largest army garrison, is local to me. So I spend a lot of my time and have done working with our veterans on exactly those type of practical issues. Because obviously in this job, as you said, like I've got to focus on the macro and the global security situation. But actually at home, what I'm dealing with and making sure that those who are serving, those who have served, are getting the treatment that they deserve back from us. And that is making sure their accommodation is right, that we look after them after they've left the forces for those who need the extra support. But crucially, that we also see veterans as an incredible asset to our country. And I know that's something that your colleagues and your programme has worked on, and just making sure that we expand the employment opportunities for veterans and make sure businesses realise what a fantastic group of people they've got who can bring so much to their workforces, as well as addressing, as you say, some of the issues that need to be addressing. So that's what I'm passionate about doing. I want this to be the best place to be a veteran anywhere in the world. That's why we've got Johnny Mercer, Veterans Minister, in Cabinet doing this and delivering on this agenda. That's how important it is to me. I've got someone sitting around the Cabinet table doing that. And actually, funnily enough, you know, Harry was asking about my experience living in the US. It's one of the things that actually when I was there, I was also struck by it, and making sure that we look after our veterans properly and do the world's best job at doing that is something that I want to deliver as Prime Minister.
Prime Minister, we're going to have to leave it there, I'm afraid. Lots of very important people are shouting in my ear that you've got to go and leave us. Sun Cabinet, thank you for your brilliant questions. Readers, thank you for your brilliant questions. Prime Minister, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
For coming.
Yeah, very nice.
Don't go anywhere, because my brilliant political colleagues at The Sun will be back for the post-match report. I'm Harry Cole. This is Never Mind the Ballots. Joining me now to analyse the PM's performance tonight is the Deputy Political Editor of The Sun, Ryan Saby, and our political correspondent, Noah Hoffman. Ryan, he never shut up, did he? I couldn't get a word in Edgeware.
He did go on. He had a lot to say. You know, we're not far off from that. We're not far off from the local elections. We're not far off from the general elections. But I think the most interesting thing that he came out with was the fact he was talking about the European Convention of Human Rights.
Yeah, I thought that.
And he's talking about how border security and illegal migration was the most important thing, and more important than being a member of any single foreign court. And I think that will be music to the ears of lots of Conservative MPs who've been pushing this over the past few years, but certainly it's been ramping up in the last couple of years since Rishi Sunak's been Prime Minister, just because they want to get on top of that that subject that is our readers were writing in about that subject, and it's important. It means a lot to them, and a lot of them cast their votes on that.
We scrutinise, we read in the runes and the sort of tiny changes in prime ministerial language. I think that was the furthest he's gone on basically hinting that he could consider and countenance reforming the ECHR, and it sounds like that's building up to a manifesto commitment.
Yeah, I would definitely. He opened the door and he's paving the way. And I think if you are on the back benches, when you watch his comments and you listen to them and read them, you'll be thinking this opens the door to a sort of a major step change in what he's thinking.
Too little, too late though, Noah. Is it going to be enough? He he looked pretty grumpy when I showed him those reform numbers and that declining Tory poll number. What do you reckon?
I do think that Rishi Sunak is looking more and more agitated and even tired every day, if I'm being
Big job.
honest.
He's been up early.
He's been up early. He had a lot to say, and he did drop a major hint with that ECHR announcement saying, that it could potentially, the subtext being that it could potentially be a manifesto commitment. But Harry, you were mentioning about him rambling on a bit, and I was listening to the rambles, and I'm not going to lie, a lot of it didn't have much substance to it, and it feels like we've got this Prime Minister who sees the clock is ticking, who sees time is running out, but just isn't producing the results, the promises, or the policy ideas that the public really needs to be getting on board with for him to win an election.
Your favourite topic came up. Our readers were very animated on housing. What did you make of his answers on the delays to the Rent Reform Bill, the leasehold stuff? It was a bit woolly, I thought.
It was wishy-washy, and to be frank, it actually wasn't an answer. And I thought what was really interesting about your interview, Harry, is that we heard this phrase repeated so many times. I'm on the side of X. I'm on the side of pensioners. I'm on the side of renters. I'm on the side of veterans. But the polling shows us that none of those groups actually believe in large numbers that the Prime Minister is on their side. He needs to be doing a lot more if he wants to prove to the public that he actually is.
Right, and I thought another interesting moment was when it was a bit of a blur for me, but I think did he say that he hasn't even decided when the election's going to be?
That's right. There's been so much speculation over the past few weeks. We've had earlier in the year, he said his working assumption was it was going to be at the latter end of the year.
But he wouldn't rule out June. I tried to get him to rule out June, and he wouldn't.
That's right. He said I haven't decided, which sort of just create even more speculation at a time when he's trying to sort of dampen that down. He still seemed to think that the working assumption was going to be the end of the year, and I think lots of people in Westminster still think that's going to be the case. But by saying that he hasn't decided, is just going to create a whole lot more, election fever.
And no, you think is true love a good enough excuse to avoid questions about his visa status over the years, his green card in the US, his wife's business affairs? Is that you won over?
They were all such fair questions. He is the Prime Minister, it's fair game. But I'm really soppy. I'm such a sucker for love as an excuse. And I thought that was a sweet moment. How genuine was it? I'd like to think it was genuine. But he did get agitated when you asked those very fair questions, Harry. And I don't think that response was necessary. The sort of, this is my private life defence was a fair answer. He is the Prime Minister, it's fair game. But I thought his little message of love to his wife was quite cute, actually. I'm a bit of a sucker for that.
And he's been to Wetherspoons, which was turned up for the book, I think. I mean, that was genuinely a question that came up more than once. And he's got the Wetherspoons app, so...
I think, the breakfasts are great there. So, when you've completed...
Tim Martin, if you're watching, we're, Ryan's after a freebie. Yeah.
When you've completed a park run, it's one of the best places you can go.
Have you ever done a park run, Ryan?
I've done, not particularly a park run, but I've been running.
Have you done a park run?
No, but it's on the bucket list.
Okay, Saturday morning though. It's a bit.
Yeah,
it's a big.
And 9 a.m. as well.
Any? So what was your sort of standout moment? Did you think there was a moment where he actually started to turn things back? I thought he was very good with Grant, the cabbie, Sun Cabbie, our transport secretary on net zero, admitting basically there's been no consultation ever on that stuff. Do you think that was reform voters?
I think one of the things that he was trying to get across is that you can't just go hell for leather, towards net zero. You have to take the public with you. And I remember just a few years ago when Theresa May signed that into
she just
legislation.
pulled it off the shelf and didn't even ask anyone.
And there was warnings from the Treasury that this is going to cost hundreds of
billions. It was £1 trillion.
Trillions of pounds. And everyone's, just signed a cheque. It seemed like a long way away. And then Rishi Sunak, we saw him last sort of October, November, saying, look, the public needs to be brought on side because if it's going to cost them thousands of pounds, they're just going to abandon any notion of the fact that they're going to go along with the politicians on this. So I thought that was, pretty interesting. And, ruling out the referendum on net zero was quite interesting.
I think the country's had quite enough of referendums. Yeah. No more on the ECHR, no more on net zero. Thank you, Noah. Thank you, Ryan. And thank you to our Sun Cabinet and, of course, our Sun readers for the brilliant questions. And thank you, too, for Prime Minister Rishi Sunak for answering some of them. Next week, we'll be joined by even more political guests. Have a good week, and never mind the ballots.